People, Deluded, I'm back again. Thank you very much for tuning back in each and every time. Hope you're all well and safe. As I've just said, we might as well speak about some news concerning Arsenal or transfer news. As we know, 98%, maybe even higher, of these rumours are nonsense. Beyond just being a good talking point for us to do while we await the next season, that's all it is really. We'll see. Now, Dani Ceballos, since I say the turn of the year, he's really come into his own and found his feet under Arteta, and we all knew he was good technically, but since Arteta's come in, he's shown, consistency as well, and we want to keep him either in a permanent or a loan capacity. Now, Real Madrid, they're facing a rebuild of their own. They've got several young to early mid-20 players that could be part of the rebuild, or sold. And Ceballos is one of them. One minute you hear Ceballos is going back, then you hear he's not, then you hear Zidane wants to take a look at him, then you hear he's lost Zidane's trust. Clearly, if Dani Ceballos had the chance, he'd be playing for Real Madrid. But what he's realised, just based on what I think, looking at the language of his interviews now compared to 6 months ago, he still maintains hope for Real Madrid, but he knows I need to play, whether that's at Real Madrid, at Arsenal, or Valencia, or Real Betis teams he's been linked with. He needs to play. He needs to play for his own development and stuff like that. He obviously wants to go to the Euros next year, so that's playing is a big part if you want to get into any team. So there's a lot to be said, people. But the latest reports coming out of Spain and Diarios, well, I think this is, I don't know the app, but it says Diarias, I don't know, man. I think this is AS, but they've said basically the bulk of it is Ceballos will return to Real Madrid, but Real Madrid changes their plans for Ceballos. They want him to return. The idea is that he joins the squad for pre-season. The disappointment of the UCL elimination has changed the plans for Odegaard and Ceballos, so two players that could be part of the rebuild. Odegaard had a decent year at Sociedad, and 1 minute he's linked with extending that, then he's coming back to the club. And when you add these lot together and throw in a couple Brazilian kids into the mix, these players might be used. They all might go out on loan and do other things. Like Real Madrid loaned out that, is it to Villarreal, is it Cuba? I can never say his name. They loaned him out. So we have to we'll have to see, people. Again, obviously, we have to consider that he's being linked to Madrid. It could all be, A, just nonsense by the articles. 2, it could be pressure by people indirectly to force Arsenal to either commit to a deal, whether that's on loan or permanent, because it does feel that, clearly Ceballos were in talks to try and keep him. Arteta said such. But just based on fans, it seems that the bulk of our operations right now is confirming the signing of Willian and potentially, if it hasn't been done already, a new deal for Aubameyang. So maybe Ceballos talks has taken a back burner. So maybe this is media talk to kind of force Arsenal's hands a bit, and things like that. Maybe this is just genuinely Madrid want to take a look at him, and for Arsenal, obviously that puts a spanner in our works of sorts, because I do believe we need a box-to-box in the creative midfielder, and you'd say Ceballos is more the creative side, but I do think you need someone in addition to him. But if we haven't got the finances, and getting a Ceballos on loan, free agent in Willian can mean that we go hard on a box-to-box like Partey, or spend a bit more in the centre-half or any other area that Arteta wants to do, then I'm all for it. It does complicate our matters because, we'd be losing Ceballos. Ceballos seems to be the guy for Xhaka right now, because Guendouzi's going to have 1 foot out the door. Torreira and Xhaka has worked well in the past, but it doesn't seem like Arteta is fully convinced on that idea. So we'd be left with a mixed match in terms of our midfield. And to be fair with you, it would probably mean we'd probably bring in a midfield. We're probably going to bring in a midfielder regardless. But let's just say that Guendouzi, Torreira, and Ceballos all depart. Ceballos returns back to Real Madrid, while obviously Guendouzi and Torreira leaves. We're very light in midfield. Then you're looking at Xhaka. Joe Willock, Maitland Niles to be forced there, and another one who's been linked with moves. You're kind of lacking options, so it would be a spanner in our works, because he seems to be. It's always dangerous planning long term or planning things for next season around a player that doesn't technically play for your club or owned by your club. But I'd imagine Ceballos is a big part as to what Arteta wants to do, and a big part in relation to locking down that midfield. So it would complicate matters even more. And to be fair, there is a case to be said. As much if Ceballos isn't here permanently, then you should maybe look at other options, because again, next season, if he starts the season how he's ended it for Arteta, then he's only the market value is only going to go higher. You know, Real Madrid might be fully convinced, if he doesn't already, to go over there, in which we've developed a player for them. Or, you know, we might get into a bidding war in that when we do want to commit to this Ceballos deal, we're financially unable to, again, developing him for someone else. And to be fair, the way I've said it, it is quite annoying. But at the same time, if Ceballos can play well to that he did this year and do his part to help us get top 4, and he goes back to Real Madrid, then fair play. It went on to say the chances of Ceballos staying at Arsenal were high, but that has now changed. Real Madrid are convinced that he has the quality to succeed in Madrid now. His recent performances against Man City and Chelsea demonstrated his ability to perform in big games. With a season that seems to be very delicate from an economic point of view due to COVID, Dani's return is perfect, in line with the club's idea of repurchasing footballers at zero cost. The idea for the club is to do the pre-season with Zidane and then make a final decision. Although he joins the pre-season, it will be Zidane who has the last word when he speaks with Dani. Ceballos wants to return, but only to play. And again, like I said, if he can play, he's fully within his rights to go back and stay, but he needs to be honest with himself. Again, I don't know Zidane and things like that, but when you hear certain words that Ceballos comes out with, it clearly Ceballos, he's not in his plans. Anything can change. You know, there's probably players that weren't in his plans that have convinced Zidane, but at the same time, you know, a few months ago he's given statements and he said it's while on loan he hasn't spoken to the manager. Of course, Zidane's got his own things to worry about. There's obviously loan managers or something along the lines at Madrid to see Ceballos is okay and mark his progress, and all of that's understandable. And Ceballos obviously realises, you know, managing a club on the scale of Real Madrid is a big thing. Zidane hasn't got time to keep phoning, but at the same time, put yourself in a manager's shoes, people. With all due respect, like let's again, Zach Swanson, and let's say Zach Swanson and Reece Nelson. Reece Nelson's previously gone out on loan. Zach Swanson obviously has. Now, in an ideal world, in fact, like I said, you treat both players the same, you treat players equally. Again, you treat players fairly. Players in general, treating footballers equally is a myth. Like, you can treat everybody fairly, but equally isn't the same. Like, in terms of professionalism, if Aubameyang makes a mistake or does something they're not supposed to do, there's going to be by everybody a degree of more lenience than if, you know, Bellerin was going to do it, and that's not fair, but it's a fact. Football life isn't treated fairly. Look at you lot in your workplace. You're treated fairly in the same way. I'd like to hope no one's discriminating against your colour. There's equal opportunities, but you're treated differently because there's levels of performance. Equality is a myth, people. It really doesn't make sense. And in relation to Ceballos, you know, there's a problem, you know. So if Zidane hasn't spoken to you, people, think about it. Yeah, put yourself in the manager's shoes, like I said. If Zidane, like I said, we factor in all the things he's got to deal with at Madrid, but think about it. If you really like a player, like I said with the example of the two players, Reece Nelson, he's gone out on loan, but I'm Arsenal manager, we're trying to get top 4 and whatever. Now and again, I'm going to call Reece Nelson and say, yo, you're right, you know, how's the loan spell going? You know, you're still part of my plans, and get his thoughts. Whereas Zach Swanson, he's, you know, I'd like to hope, you know, he's still, I'm not saying don't care about him and things, but if I'm Arsenal's manager, he's out of sight, out of mind, he's nothing to do with me, so I'm less likely to be calling his phone and things like that. And when you are alone and you're saying your manager hasn't spoken to you and things like that, it is upsetting. Look at Emile Smith-Rowe. Clearly Arteta wants him because he says he's spoken to him when he was at Huddersfield to some capacity. Do you get it, people? So, you know, you're out of sight, out of mind. You know, if you can convince Zidane to play, it's his dream to play for Madrid. But who knows, people? Who knows? Moving away from that though, and you know, I don't want to say the paper, but it rhymes with bun. So yeah, apparently Arsenal want Ajax star Quincy Promes in a £25 million transfer to bolster Mikel Arteta's options up front. Decent player. I think we should stay clear, and I think this is just paper talk. Again, anything can happen, but it just seems like paper talk and being very creative. Reports in Italy again with Lacazette are saying Juventus want to sign Lacazette. Mikel Arteta is willing to let the player leave. Arsenal are thinking of Douglas Costa as a counterpart. For now, Juventus are continuing their pursuit of Milik of Napoli, which is consistent with what you've heard all season in relation to Milik. You know, Lacazette would be an idiot not to go Juventus, even in some capacity. Working with better players, working at a better club with higher expectations, going to probably win a league title, the way of life in Italy. These are all attractive propositions. Better wages as well. Look at, I hear Aaron Ramsey, they want to sell Aaron Ramsey and things, you know, even though his agent has quashed it, but he's on good wages at 29 years of age, you know. Can you go and get something like that? I wouldn't mind Douglas Costa on the basis of, you know, he's a good 1v1 specialist out wide, and I'd be more on Douglas Costa than Willian. But I think we should just get the finances if we're not going to explore other options, like, you know, we have to float the idea of Aaron Ramsey back. Again, wages makes that impossible beyond the loan. Again, is there any centre-halves or defensive midfielders or any other areas of the team that people want to leave and we can exploit? Can they give us the baller? Obviously, I know that won't happen. But I think Douglas Costa's a quality player, but you've got to be wary now, you know. We need players that can help us immediately now. But what is he, 31 or something like that? I could be wrong, people. And then you'd add Willian. You know, Aubameyang's an exception. But again, just to look at it, you'd have Willian, Luiz, Socrates, Cedric Suarez, not 30 odd at the time, but his contract will take him in there. You have players on the wrong side of 30, and again, you need players for now, which Aubameyang is the exception because he's proven that. Hopefully Willian is, but it does make me a bit nervous, people, in terms of longevity. Sorry, I'm being harsh on him. He's 29, and to be fair with you, you know, I know regardless of what I said about him being 29 and now 30, I don't necessarily mind the age thing. I just think it's something I just mention it because I think it's something to be wary of in relation to Arsenal and needing resale value. And again, it's not the Mesut Ozil thing, but a player on the wrong side of 30 on big wages it is dangerous. And for me, I wouldn't mind, you know, in general, I don't mind players coming at 28, 29 years of age, you know, even in their 30s, as long as they're exceptions to the rules in terms of ability and things like that. I really don't care and don't mind people. And at the same time, I wouldn't mind Douglas Costa or any people with that age, because again, they're not the same position and it's not relevant, and I could be wrong, but didn't Fernandinho arrive at Man City at 28 years of age? He's now 33 or so, or however old, and you know, he's winding down, but he's been a terrific serviceman with them. And you know, he might on paper 28 might not scream mad longevity, but he's giving them 4 solid years of something. And you know, when he calls it a day, the void that Fernandinho leaves is a madness, and he's slotted in well in centre half. Well, later on in his career at City, centre half, most known for him in midfield. So the age thing, it's not always black and white, but we'll have to see, man. I don't buy the Lacazette thing for what it's worth, people. Moving away from that, apparently Fulham are considering a move to sign Arsenal's Callum Chambers, with Scott Parker keen to bring him back on a permanent deal. Fulham would have to pay around 12 million for the versatile defender, and Arsenal are unlikely to stand in the way of his departure. Obviously, we need to see some movement in relations to centre halves. For me, you know, I'd actually give Chambers if we did get a certain offer and Chambers leaves, it's not the end of the world, but I'd give Chambers a chance, to be fair, when he gets fully fit and things. I think he's proven he can have a say in the squad, and I'd rather Chambers than Socrates, to be fair with you, and I know that he's not involved in a couple others. 12 million, you know, we could take that. It's a permanent transfer. We get what we need to do. For him, it's happier memories. He returns to Fulham, a club that he played. Regardless, I do think we'd be selling ourselves a bit short, because did we not pay 16 for him? You can imagine you should be able to get that back, man. He's played relatively a decent amount of time in the Premier League and things like that. I'm sure he's been called up for England as well. Don't think he's made his debut, as well as being at Arsenal. So I'd imagine you should be able to make his 16 million back. You know, 20 would make me do business, but I do think 12 is a bit short. So we'll have to see what happens in them regards, people. But that's all it is, man. So, you know, we've spoken about Lacazette and Costa, Ceballos for the bulk of this vid, and a couple of other things, but that's all I've seen in relation to transfers or of relevance, people. So it is what it is. In fact, AC Milan apparently are trying to buy that young Swedish striker Roback who we wanted, so it seems that he's not coming to Arsenal. But on that note, people, DG, I'm out, man.